When you think about Japan, and motorsports in Japan in particular, you probably think about the Formula 1 Japanese Grand Prix. Or if you're a huge motorsports nerd like myself, you're probably aware of the Super GT series, which is Japan's premier racing series. The last thing you'd probably think of is NASCAR. But in the mid to late 1990s, NASCAR would host races outside of the United States. And those races would be held halfway across the world in the land of the rising sun, Japan. In 1994, Hiromichi Suzuki, the general manager of the Suzuka circuit, visited Daytona International Speedway. This was his first time seeing a NASCAR race in person, and he absolutely fell in love with it. He immediately thought, man, we have to do this in Japan. So he visited the NASCAR offices unannounced, and somehow landed a meeting with Bill France Jr. The two would then come to an agreement to host exhibition races in Japan. The next step was to visit the Suzuka circuit. So Brian France and Ken Clapp, who was the VP for Western Operations at NASCAR, headed over to the Suzuka circuit, and they were immediately impressed. In November 1995, a deal was done and signed for a 3-year contract for NASCAR to host exhibition races at season's end in Japan. To some Japanese people, it was a little confusing to what NASCAR actually was, as the word NAS and car both have a meaning in Japan. If you're wondering what it is, well, here, have a listen.
Okay, this is a true story. NASCAR. NAS means eggplant in Japanese. Ka means question mark, questionaries. NASCAR sounds like, is this an eggplant? So that's a huge culture gap.
So in November 1996, the NASCAR Winston Cup Series and most of its teams and drivers headed out to the Suzuka circuit in Japan. Not every team made the trip, and some teams did make the trip without their regular driver. Jimmy Spencer did not make the trip out to Japan either, and the team had Japanese driver Hideo Fukuyama fill in for him. He would actually make 4 Cup Series starts in the United States. His first one in 2002 at Dover. But there was another Japanese driver who entered the races with a very high profile. His name is Keichi Sochiya. If you never heard of him, you might know him by his other name, the Drift King. This man literally had a motorsports career in Japan from his reputation in underground street racing. He had a cameo in Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. In fact, he was the stunt driver and stunt coordinator for the entire movie. The part where Sean is learning to drift on the mountain, that was him behind the wheel. In fact, they had to do multiple takes because the scene was supposed to be someone who is learning to drift, but he was just too good that they had to keep doing it and doing it again until it looked like he was not very good at drifting. As for the NASCAR regulars, they got to experience the Japanese culture for the first time, especially eating the traditional Japanese food.
Here, Jeffrey. I'll eat it. Take the head off, though. That's pork, right? Pork? Chicken? Maybe tiki. I've never seen chicken look like that.
A lot of the teams, though, still found their way to McDonald's. As for the Japanese fans, they had an amazing new experience because the drivers, teams, and cars were accessible. Formula 1 had limited to no accessibility, especially back in the 90s. When it came to race day, the field was pretty diverse. Most of NASCAR Winston Cup's top teams and drivers made the trip. One notable exception was Roush. Rusty Wallace was on pole with Ernie Irvan sharing the front row with him. Then you had Ron Hornaday, who was the Truck Series champion. There was also a few Winston West Series drivers, including Lance Hooper, who was the defending champion, and a driver by the name of Herschel McGriff. Herschel's first start in the Cup Series was the inaugural 1950 Southern 500 at Darlington, and to this day, he still stands as the oldest driver to race in a NASCAR sanctioned event at 90 years old. And in case you're wondering, no, that wasn't this race. That race happened only a couple years ago in 2018 when he raced the K&N Pro Series West race for Bill McNally Racing at Tucson Speedway. The race itself will be broken down into 2 50-lap segments with a 15-minute intermission in between, so teams can make changes and change tires to the car, as there was no live pit stops during this race. The top 10 finishers would also be inverted, similar to an all-star format. Rusty Wallace got off to a dominating start in the beginning of the race, but then started to fade towards the end of the segment. Rusty said he was getting a little brake fade, but I definitely think it was by design, as Rusty kind of admits it in this interview.
We're not stupid. We're not going to throw this race away. We got fast cars. We're not going to get jammed in the back.
This resulted Jeff Gordon in winning the first stage.
End of that first segment with Gordon winning.
Rusty, you started backing up there a little bit. How are you?
I'm up there right now. It's just I started losing the front brakes, and when I started losing, I said, man, there's no use pushing. I'm going to get in the pits and see what they can do with it.
We cooled the brakes off on the brake. And we went out and everything was fine after that.
When racing resumed, Rusty charged his way back to the front, but the story of the race might have been Hideo Fukuyama. Driving Jimmy Spencer's 23 car, he was running in the top 10 with less than 10 laps to go. Unfortunately, contact with Wally Dallenbach sent him into the wall, ending his day. Rusty Wallace would relatively be unchallenged and would take the victory, but Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt had a pretty epic last lap battle for second place.
I think we're getting a white-green right here. You're going to get a white flag. White-green, headed for checkers.
Boy, this ought to be wild. You can see them shaking the cars down through there to clean the tires as they head down to turn one. Here comes Gordon on the inside of Earnhardt.
Gordon holds third spot. Now he's trying for second. He's up on the inside. Even across. What a battle for second place.
That was his chance. I don't believe he can get Earnhardt, but he made that bold move on the inside in turn two. He's looking on the inside of Earnhardt again.
No points, just pride right here. Takes another shot at him. Gordon is right there. Works down to the inside and from that car just in front. He's great. Rusty Wallace looking back at the field as they go through the S's.
Okay, what he has to do now is exactly what he's doing. He's put the bumper to him just a little bit to move Earnhardt to the outside. Jeff Gordon fighting on the inside.
Here they come for the checkered flag. Wallace coming down, Gordon on the inside. And as they come to the line, oh, you want to call that one?
I'm going to wait for a replay.
Wow. Looks like Earnhardt may have pulled it off by just that much.
The NASCAR Winston Cup Series returned to Suzuka in 1997, and before the race, some NASCAR history was made. During qualifying for the event, it was raining, and for the first time ever, NASCAR would run an official session on rain tires. These rain tires were tested a few years prior at Watkins Glen. Dale Earnhardt and Mark Martin rolled out their backup cars to test them out, and they would come in handy during this practice session. The field for the 1997 event was relatively the same as the previous season. This time, Mark Martin made the trip, as he was the lone Roush entry. He also scored the pole for the event. The Drift King himself would be entered in the event again. Hendrick Motorsports would bring two cars over, but it would not be Terry Labonte and Jeff Gordon behind the wheel. Ricky Craven was behind the wheel of Jeff Gordon's car, and newly crowned Truck Series champion Jack Sprague was behind the wheel of the number 5. Cale Jarrett was also absent from this event, as Robert Yates Racing brought over one car with Kenny Irwin Jr. One new entry though was Jim Richards. He was an Australian touring car champion, and at this point in his career, a 5-time winner of the Bathurst 1000. He would start alongside Mark Martin on the front row. Before the start of the race, NASCAR President Mike Helton announced that the race would be moved to the newly built Twin Ring Motegi, as the track featured a 1.5-mile oval, the first of its kind built in Japan. The race format would change a little bit in 1997. They would extend the race by 25 laps, and the race would be run in a more traditional Winston Cup style, green to checkered flag with regular pit stops. Although this would be a challenge for some teams, Hendrick Motorsports used one pit crew to pit both of their cars. Even though there's no footage of it, they did double stack both of their cars, similar to an F1 pit stop. When the race got underway, Mark Martin would lead the action-packed first half of the race. He would be relatively unchallenged, as lots of his competitors ended up dropping out or finding trouble early, such as Rusty Wallace blowing an engine only 8 laps in, and Dale Earnhardt getting a flat tire after contact with Wally Dallenbach and going hard into the wall. That wouldn't stop the Intimidator though. Even though he was 4 laps down, he got back out on the track, he had fresh tires, he literally ran Mark Martin down and got one of his laps back despite being in a destroyed race car. Unfortunately, the two would come into contact and Earnhardt would go for a spin going into turn number 1. Dale would continue to fight after this before mechanical problems eventually put him out of the race. Another big moment had to be Wally Dallenbach. Him and Lance Hooper made contact and Wally Dallenbach went into the wall hard. Thankfully he was alright. In the end, Mike Skinner would edge out Mark Martin to get his first NASCAR Winston Cup Series win, although it just being an exhibition. Australian touring car legend Jim Richards, he would come home in 6th place with a very solid run. Keichi Sochiya would finish 11th and be the highest finishing Japanese driver.
You to go, went onto the trucks and now into Winston Cup, and he's about to pull one off.
Pulling off his right, turning down into turn 8, heading for the home stretch.
Across the stripe, winning the NASCAR Thunder Special Suzuka is car number 31. Mike Skinner, Susanville, California, has done it here in Japan on this Sunday afternoon. My, what a Sunday afternoon ride he's had.
The 1998 running of the race would move to the Twin Ring Motegi Oval. This is another important race in NASCAR history, as this would be the first time that Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Dale Earnhardt Jr. would race against each other. And if you listen to Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s podcast, this is the race where the infamous shoe accident happened.
Here in Japan.
Dad, I think, had kind of resigned to the fact that, you know, they're going to run 5th or 6th, 7th, whatever. A couple laps to go. We go out there and with our new tires, you know, we got to go. And I remember coming up off the corner, off of turn 4, Dad's on the outside, and I just drove up across the racetrack. We hit a little bit, and he lifted me up and had me down the straightaway. He wasn't very happy because I almost pinched him in the wall. The only thing I cared about was that I beat Dad. I didn't think anything of what happened between us on the track, and I sit down, and I'm like still amped up, and Dad's over there taking his shoes off. This shoe come by my head as fast as he could throw it, hard as he could throw it. He didn't say anything. We didn't argue. You know, we got on the plane and went home. But we never discussed it. But that you know, I'll never forget the shoe.
Jeremy Mayfield led the field to the green flag, but Jeff Gordon took the lead on the second lap, returning to Japan after missing the previous year's race. The first real drama of the race came when the leaders were lapping Motohiro Nakagi. He lost it and ended up getting into the side of Jeff Gordon. Fortunately, this would not ruin Jeff's day. Unfortunately, the next major incident of the race was the Drift King, Keichi Sochiya. He got a little high in 3 and 4 into the marbles, lost control in front of the field, and ended up getting hit by Randy Nelson, effectively ending his day. Later in the race, unfortunate luck would strike Daryl Waltrip, who was filling in for Dale Jarrett in the '88 Robert Yates Racing Ford. Unfortunately, Daryl would get into the wall, and this would end his day. The last major incident of the race would happen around 14 laps to go, when Brendan Gaughan and Bobby Hamilton had a huge wreck. Unfortunately, there was no replay of the incident, but both cars pounded the wall hard, and Gaughan's car burst into flames. This would set up a restart with only 6 laps to go, and Mike Skinner was able to hold off a hard-charging Jeff Gordon to win his 2nd consecutive race in Japan.
At bottom. Final moments, turn 3. Gordon turns it up. Here he comes, cranking it up on the bottom. Moving closer, inching it up. Here they come for the finish. Skinner stays in front. All right, get it.
Boy, good job, guys. This son of a pushed like a plow. I know you hate to hear it, but she pushed bad.
So Mike Skinner wins 2 of the 3 Japanese NASCAR races. Unfortunately, this would be the end of the NASCAR Cup Series in Japan, as the contract expired at the end of that year and a new one was not negotiated. The NASCAR Winston West Series, however, did make the trip out to Japan in 1999 to host their season finale race. Unfortunately, that was a one and done event, as the cost to get everything over there was extremely high, especially for a lower series, and without the Winston Cup star power, the attendance was down. So this wraps up my video on the history of NASCAR in Japan. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more NASCAR content like this. Hitting the like button helps me out a lot, and hit the bell to be notified when I upload new content. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody.